mess with Mr. Wonderful. Thank you, fans, very much. Love you all, and I love my beautiful wife, Rhonda.
Paul Orndorff, the Mr. Wonderful of wrestling, lived a life as dramatic as his piledriver. He battled giants in the ring, but his biggest fights were often outside of it. From steroid use to backstage brawls and a shocking lawsuit, let's dive into the controversial career of this wrestling legend and how all this led to his sad end in 2021. Born on October 29, 1949, Paul grew up as an athletic powerhouse. He played college football for the University of Tampa, where he absolutely crushed it as a fullback and tight end. In his college career, he scored 21 touchdowns and racked up over 2,000 yards. It didn't take long for the NFL to notice, and in 1973, the New Orleans Saints drafted him. But football wasn't in the cards for him after all. Instead, wrestling was calling his name. And let me tell you, Orndorff answered that call in a big way. Paul's wrestling career began in 1976 in championship wrestling from Florida. And get this, he had some incredible matches against future legend Jerry Lawler. Their rivalry was intense, and Orndorff quickly proved he was a natural in the ring, winning his first major title, the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. But his real breakthrough came in the 1980s when he joined the WWF, now known as WWE. Paul teamed up with manager Bobby Heenan and found himself facing the biggest names in wrestling. Yes, that means Hulk Hogan. Together, they headlined some of the biggest events in wrestling history, including the first ever WrestleMania and Survivor Series. An injury eventually pushed Paul to retire in 2000, but he never really left the wrestling world. Instead, he shared his passion by training the next generation of wrestlers, leaving a lasting legacy both in and out of the ring. But life was never simple. His controversies and impact weren't subtle at all, gentlemen. He was a man of drama and conflict. Let's take a closer look. To understand Orndorff's impact, we have to go back to the 1980s, a time when wrestling was obsessed with power, muscle, and size. Fans expected these guys to look like comic book heroes, and wrestlers were under pressure to push their bodies to the absolute limit. Then enters steroids. Orndorff, like many of his peers, openly admitted to using performance-enhancing drugs. Back then, the industry was way less regulated, and the focus was on delivering jaw-dropping physiques to keep fans captivated. Steroids provided a shortcut to building that superhero look, and Orndorff was the embodiment of this trend. Huge muscle mass, lightning-fast recovery, and the kind of strength that made him look unstoppable. But there's a dark side. Today we know a lot more about the dangers of steroids. They've been linked to serious health risks like heart disease, liver damage, and intense mood swings. And though Orndorff's use was, in a way, a product of his time, it's a chapter of wrestling history that's tough to ignore. The impact on health, both mental and physical, is something we'll be talking about today in this video. But before that, Orndorff's passion wasn't just for show, it was real. He had a reputation as one of the most intense personalities in wrestling, and that fire often flared up behind the scenes. He was known for being hot-headed and quick to defend himself. If someone crossed him, Orndorff wasn't afraid to settle things, no matter where he was. One of the most legendary stories from Orndorff's career is his backstage confrontation with Vader. Now, Vader was no small opponent. He was a massive, powerful wrestler who was notorious for his stiff, hard-hitting style. But Orndorff? He didn't care. According to the rumors, words quickly escalated to fists, and the two went at it right there in the locker room. While we may never know the exact details, the message was clear. Orndorff wasn't about to back down from anyone, no matter how big or intimidating they were. This intensity was part of what made him so compelling to fans, but it also led to plenty of friction backstage. But if you think this is it, think again. In 1988, Orndorff made a decision that stunned fans. He left the WWF just as he was reaching the peak of his popularity. This wasn't just any wrestler walking away. Orndorff had built a huge fan base and had been part of some of the most iconic matches and rivalries. So why would Mr. Wonderful leave the biggest stage in wrestling? Well, Orndorff never publicly shared all the details, but insiders suggest it was a mix of feeling undervalued and creatively frustrated. He reportedly wasn't happy with his pay and felt like the WWF wasn't allowing him to grow as a character. It got to a point where he felt he couldn't stay any longer. He eventually joined WCW, but his exit from WWF marked a big change, a turning point in his career, and maybe even in his life. While WCW gave him a fresh start, leaving WWF had ripple effects. Fans felt his absence, and his career took a different direction from that point on. Then came 1990. During a match in WCW, Orndorff suffered a severe neck injury, one that would change the course of his life. This injury didn't just end his in-ring career. It led to a drawn-out and bitter legal battle with WCW. Orndorff sued WCW, claiming they'd mishandled his injury. He argued that they pressured him to keep wrestling before he was fully healed, and their inadequate medical care only made things worse. This lawsuit highlighted the risks wrestlers were taking, not just in the ring, but with companies that sometimes prioritize the show over their health. Perhaps one of the most unsettling stories involving Orndorff is his alleged altercation with a fan. Not just any fan, but an 81-year-old man. Details are scarce, and Orndorff never publicly addressed the incident, leaving much of it to speculation. But despite all the ups and downs, Orndorff's achievements in wrestling are undeniable. He was a natural athlete with unmatched charisma, and his in-ring psychology was top-notch. His feuds with greats like Hulk Hogan, Roddy Piper, and Rick Rude are forever etched in wrestling history. And in 2005, the WWE recognized his contributions by inducting him into the Hall of Fame. And then, in 2011, Orndorff faced a serious health battle when he was diagnosed with throat cancer. At one point, it was so severe that doctors didn't expect him to survive. He was on a feeding tube and was told he only had a few days left to live. But in true Mr. Wonderful fashion, Paul fought through it, and by August, he announced that the cancer was gone. It was a huge victory for him and his family, and his story inspired fans everywhere. Sadly, he passed away on July 12, 2021 at the age of 71. He had been struggling with dementia, which is a disease that affects the brain and makes it hard to remember things and think clearly. 1. While his official cause of death was not announced, his son Travis believed his dementia may have been related to CTE, a brain injury often caused by repeated blows to the head, which can happen in wrestling. Although he is gone, his legacy still lives on. Paul started wrestling in 1976 and quickly found himself in a feud with a young Jerry Lawler. And get this, he won his first wrestling title by beating Lawler for the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. This was just the beginning of his rise. After that, Orndorff moved on to the NWA Tri-State promotion, where he had an intense feud with Ernie Ladd, winning the North American Heavyweight title not once, but twice. But both reigns were short-lived, thanks to Ladd, who was determined to keep Orndorff from the top. In 1978, he teamed up with Jimmy Snuka, and together they won the NWA World Tag Team Championship. Then he made his way to Alabama, where he held the tag titles with partners like Dick Slater and Norval Austin, also known as the Junkyard Dog. Yes, the Junkyard Dog. By 1980, Paul was wrestling full-time in Mid-South, where he got into one of his wildest storylines yet, going after Ken Mantell, who loved cutting his opponent's hair. Orndorff turned the tables, winning the right to use the notorious Freebird hair removal cream on Mantell. In 1982, Orndorff took his talents to Georgia Championship Wrestling, where he won the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. Then, he set his sights on even bigger challenges, taking on wrestling icon Ric Flair. Later that year, he went international with New Japan Pro Wrestling, facing legends like Antonio Inoki and Riki Choshu. Paul Orndorff was unstoppable, moving from one big feud to another and becoming a wrestling superstar along the way. His intense style, powerful moves, and unbreakable drive left a mark in every promotion he entered. In late 1983, Paul Orndorff joined the World Wrestling Federation, or WWF, making his debut on the Championship Wrestling. From the start, he teamed up with none other than Roddy Piper, who became his manager and gave him the nickname Mr. Wonderful. The name stuck, and Orndorff truly lived up to it with his impressive strength and charisma. Early in 1984, Orndorff got a taste of the main event spotlight when he faced Salvatore Bellomo. This was the same night that Hulk Hogan won the WWF World Heavyweight Championship, marking the birth of Hulkamania. Riding the wave of Hogan's popularity, Orndorff quickly became one of the first to challenge Hogan for the title, launching him straight into the spotlight. Around this time, Orndorff became closely associated with Piper and often teamed up with him to face popular wrestlers like Jimmy Superfly Snuka and the Tonga Kid. These matches showcased Orndorff's intense fighting style, and he quickly became a memorable figure in the ring. As 1984 wrapped up, a new storyline saw Piper attack pop star Cyndi Lauper. This led to an unforgettable showdown at the War to Settle the Score, where Orndorff and Piper faced Hogan and Mr. T in a tag team match that set the stage for the very first WrestleMania in 1985. At WrestleMania, Orndorff's team lost when an interference attempt from Bob Orton Jr. backfired, leading to Hogan pinning Orndorff. This loss set off a big turn in Orndorff's career and hinted at a new direction for him. After the WrestleMania loss, Orndorff was furious. Piper and Orton turned on him, leading Orndorff to become a fan favorite, or babyface. Soon after, Orndorff began teaming up with Hogan to take on Piper and Orton in tag matches across the country. But this new alliance didn't stop Orndorff from stirring up some drama. When Bobby the Brain Heenan, his former manager, placed a bounty on Orndorff's head, many wrestlers tried to claim it, leading to intense matches with opponents like Roddy Piper and Bob Orton. During this time, Orndorff even teamed up with wrestling legends like Andre the Giant and Bruno Sammartino to hold off Heenan's group. This period saw Orndorff solidify his place as a key player in WWF, with feuds that kept fans at the edge of their seats. In 1986, things heated up between Hogan and Orndorff, egged on by Adrian Adonis, who kept calling Orndorff Hulk Jr. and claiming he'd gone soft. Orndorff started to doubt his partnership with Hogan. This doubt turned into betrayal during a match where Orndorff, frustrated by Hogan's popularity, attacked him with a devastating clothesline and piledriver, officially kicking off one of wrestling's most intense rivalries. Orndorff rejoined Heenan and adopted Hogan's theme music, Real American, which became a signature part of his entrance. However, during this feud, Orndorff suffered a serious arm injury in a weightlifting accident. Determined not to lose momentum, he kept wrestling despite the injury. This decision only made his feud with Hogan even more legendary, as fans knew he was fighting through real pain. Their rivalry peaked with a steel cage match in 1987, where they both escaped the cage at the same time. After the referee declared it a draw, the match restarted and Hogan won. This feud is still remembered as one of the most profitable in wrestling history. After his feud with Hogan ended, Orndorff took a step back. His injury was taking a toll, and he wrestled a reduced schedule. In early 1988, he decided to retire temporarily to focus on recovering. During this time, Orndorff actually faced some strange rumors about his health. There were even reports of his death in some newspapers, which turned out to be false but added to the mystery around him. While he was away, Orndorff focused on rebuilding his strength, although the nerve damage in his arm had led to noticeable atrophy. In 1990, Orndorff made his return to wrestling, this time with World Championship Wrestling, WCW. He quickly joined a group called the Dudes with Attitudes, teaming up with big names like Sting and Lex Luger to face the Four Horsemen, one of WCW's most dominant groups. Orndorff's comeback was strong, and he reminded fans why he earned the Mr. Wonderful nickname. Orndorff soon entered a rivalry with Arn Anderson and Barry Windham, and by the summer of 1990, he was a prominent figure in WCW, fighting top talents across the country. However, later that year, he left WCW and joined the Universal Wrestling Federation, UWF, a smaller wrestling promotion. In the early 90s, Orndorff kept busy, wrestling for the UWF and American Wrestling Federation. He became a top contender in these organizations, even holding titles like the UWF Southern States Championship. Orndorff also worked briefly in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where he entered a tournament for the heavyweight title. Although he didn't win the tournament, he continued to entertain fans with his classic wrestling style and intense rivalry. Orndorff returned to WCW in 1992, where he joined forces with manager Harley Race and soon claimed the WCW World Television Championship. He teamed up with Rick Rude and entered the tag team scene, facing competitors like Dustin Rhodes. Orndorff also reignited his rivalry with Cactus Jack in a brutal Falls Count Anywhere match that kept fans talking. Over the years, Orndorff continued competing in WCW's tag division, forming alliances and taking on challenges from rising stars. He eventually retired in 2001 after a long and successful career. Orndorff lived most of his life in Fayetteville, Georgia, with his high school sweetheart, Rhonda Maxwell. They married and had a close-knit family with 2 sons, Paul Orndorff III and Travis Orndorff, and an impressive 8 grandchildren. That's a lot of little Mr. Wonderfuls running around. Paul also had siblings. His sister Patricia and 2 brothers, Mickey and Terry, were close to him. Fun fact, Terry and Paul actually wrestled together briefly as a tag team in the early 1980s. Although Terry didn't go on to have the same kind of career Paul did, he still teamed up with big names like the Junkyard Dog and Kerry Von Erich, showing that wrestling was a true family affair for the Orndorffs. Paul Orndorff's life outside the ring shows us another side to the man fans knew as Mr. Wonderful. Through family bonds, health battles, and legal fights, Orndorff's life was just as intense as his career. His resilience and determination, whether in the ring or facing life's challenges, prove why he'll always be remembered as one of wrestling's true legends. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. What are your thoughts on the life of Mr. Wonderful? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next video.